Hello, everyone, and to our new listeners, thanks for joining in. I'm Tracy, here with Joelle, Chandi, Andy, and James, and you're listening to a review of Death in the Maiden, a play by Ariel Dorfman.
So Tracy, you know a lot about Dorfman. What is this author about?
Well, Dorfman was born in 1942 in Buenos Aires. After moving to Chile when he was very young, he worked as a professor at the University of Chile, and later attended graduate school at the University of California at Berkeley, before returning back to Chile. He served as cultural advisor to President Salvador Allende and wrote a critique of North American cultural imperialism, called How to Read Donald Duck. Since 1985, he has taught at Duke University as a professor of literature and of Latin American studies.
Yeah, his works have also been translated into 40 languages and performed in over 100 countries.
Wow, Joelle, thanks. I didn't know that. He has won numerous awards for his poetry, essays, novels, and plays. He has actually also won the award for Best Television Drama in Britain for his show Prisoners in Time.
So why don't you explain what happened for those who haven't seen or read the play?
Well, Paulina and Gerardo are a married couple living in Latin America. Paulina is a former political prisoner to a group of men, and particularly a doctor who raped her and played Schubert's Death in the Maiden while he committed the crime. Because this was such a traumatic event for Paulina, the song itself became a trigger to flashbacks of her abuse.
When does Dr. Miranda come into play?
Well, Dr. Miranda comes into their home after he helped Gerardo with a flat tire during the night, and from hearing his voice, Paulina is certain that this is the doctor involved in her abuse. From this, she ties him up, and a majority of the play is her holding him captive with a gun and forcing him to confess what she believes he did.
So what does Gerardo think of all this?
Well, throughout the play, Gerardo is not convinced of Miranda's guilt and actually tries to help him by writing a sufficient confession based on what Paulina has told him. Committed the crime could naturally fix these mistakes, and says that she's going to kill him even though he confessed. At the end, we see Paulina and Gerardo at the concert hall seeing a performance. When Schubert's Death in the Maiden is played, Miranda appears, but we don't know whether he's actually there, meaning that she did not kill him, or if rather he is a figment of her imagination.
So, Joel, are there any significant themes in this play?
As a matter of fact, there are a few central themes that I thought in the play that were important.
Can you tell us more about them?
The central theme that I thought that was significant was making amends and forgiveness. While there was no acceptable reason for the violence of the military regime, Paulina does imply that she can forgive the man for raping her. She promises to release Miranda if he will confess to raping her. However, the audience does not know if Paulina actually ends up killing Miranda or if the song is actually a figment of her imagination. The play also implies that notwithstanding the persistent thought of political domination, there are no solid acts that can compensate for previous wrongdoings.
Now that I know the reasons why forgiveness and making amends play a big role in the play, would you mind telling me why justice versus injustice does it as well?
Well, I believe that Ariel Dorfman achieves to bring together three diverse interpretations of themes like justice and injustice. Paulina, the poor, harmless, yet intellectual girl, just has to take action against what she believes to be unfair and stand up for herself. Gerardo, a recently selected leader of an investigation, tries uncovering the truth about the crimes and finally requests justice. However, Dr. Roberto Miranda, the opposite of the other characters in the play, is the epitome for all that is unfair. In this particular conflict, between three diverse characters, their lives, their thoughts, and their actions, this makes the reader's view on the themes very different. Paulina's representations of all the other victims in her country and world who have suffered. She stands up for what she believes in, representing her to be the protagonist in the play. Now that I'm done talking about all the important themes, were there any symbols or motifs that stuck out to you, Andy?
There are a few symbols and motifs throughout the play. One of the most obvious ones that is introduced in the beginning of the play is the home that Paulina lives in. Because of the dark history of Paulina, she feels that home is one place where she can feel in control and safe in, and she desires for that. And one of the other symbols that is introduced in the beginning of the play is the car breaking down. It's very important just because it's the introduction to everything that's bad about to happen throughout the play. And another symbol is the jack that Paulina just gives away freely to her mother. It's basically relevant to the car and the home. It's just basically Paulina's desire for control. She wants to have the control in her life, and her husband basically undercuts every decision she makes. He basically gives her illusion of the safety in her home, and because of that, she feels that she needs to go out of her way even more to feel in control, and her giving away Jack to her mother like that is just a symbol for her desire for control. A very important motif in the play, actually, is the song by Schubert called Death in the Maiden. The play was actually named after the song, and basically is a motif throughout the play that triggers aggression and flashbacks for Paulina of her dark past as a political prisoner. And one of the last symbols in the play is the gun. It's introduced in the beginning when she is listening to Roberto and Gerardo talking, and she's just basically very nervous. And it's basically a symbol for power. It all links back to the car, the home, the jack. It's basically her control and desire to have power and control. So, Chani, enough about symbols and motifs. I heard you know a lot about the mise en scène.
Yes, I do, starting with the stage setting. The setting took place in a beach house that Gerardo and Paulina lived in. The living room and the dining room and terrace, from the viewer's point of view, would be most prominent, and the bedroom would be placed on the side. And if we shift to the concert scene, during the concert portion, you would see a very large mirror used to reflect to the audience in the faces of the actors. The props used mainly would be the gun and the recorder. The costume and makeup would be kept to a minimum, but slightly higher class and proper.
So what about the sound and lighting?
The sounds consist of the light crashing of the waves in the background from the beach house and the light clicking of the recorder. The lighting consists of the faint spotlight used to represent the moonlight, and the overall scenes were dark since most of the scenes were taken in place at night, including the concert hall scene. But I know there's a lot of historical context behind it. So Andy, could you tell us more about it?
I definitely can. It all starts off with a ruler in Chile from 1973 to 1988. His name was Augusto Pinochet. He had a concentration camp called Chacabuco, and it was estimated to hold more than 1,800 people at the time. And throughout the concentration camp's history, it killed 3,197 people, and about 29,000 people were tortured. And during this time, I think 2/3 of the killing and tortures was prominent in the first year of his ruling in 1973. And in these concentration camps, the officers that were in charge were called DINA, short for Directorate of National Intelligence. They were like a secret police-like organization. And the DINA and Augusto Pinochet basically had way too much power than they should have had during their rule in Chile. And it was just bad because the DINA basically had so much power that even diplomats in Chile were killed and disappear without a trace, and there was nothing people could do about it. And even people outside of Chile, if they were Chileans, DINA would spy on them to make sure they were living according to their scripture, I guess. And if they didn't live according to the scripture, they would be held as political prisoners and just be captured just like regular prisoners would be. And even the tortures that they did, even though I don't want to gross everyone out, it is just a very important part because it just gives you a better visual picture on how they were tortured and just gives you a better understanding of what people went through. And basically, one of the forms of torture they would do is they would beat people with chains and be left to die slowly from internal injuries. Rape was a very common form of torture during the days. They would use unnecessary and just unnatural acts with animals, just like dogs and rodents. So, I mean, that probably gives you a very disgusting mental picture on what happened. And another form of torture, they would have electricity drawn from a standard wall through a cable box, and with 2 wires, they would just electrocute people. And one of the worst ways they would torture people, they would get pregnant women and basically just throw them out of the airplane. And Paulina was one of these political prisoners, and that just gives you a little background on what she went through before, I guess, the play happens.
Wow, thanks, Andy. That was really powerful. Tracy, do you know when this play was first performed?
The play opened in Santiago, Chile in March 1991, and it had its world premiere at the Royal Court upstairs in July of 1991, and after that it took off to Broadway in America and to several other countries. The film adaptation in 1994 was directed by Roman Polanski, and there was an opera based on the play composed by Jonas Forsell in 2008. James, can you tell us more about the comparisons?
Death in the Maiden corresponds with several other plays and movies we've heard about in these last few months. First, we have this deconstructing Harry. One of the most apparent is the jump cuts and dialogue cuts used to represent where the character is mentally with the world. Another major comparison with this deconstructing Harry is the characters imagining others, such as when Paulina may be imagining Miranda in the final scene. Death in the Maiden also compares with Puccini for beginners because the women in both are in control of the situation. It compares Zotzi because both main characters are trying to find an inner peace. Lastly, it compares with the Laramie Project because we learn of the consequences people can face for their crimes.
Wow, James, thanks. I didn't realize all of those comparisons while reading the play. We hope you feel more informed about Ariel Dorfman's death in the Maiden. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great day.